I'm speaking about my husband, Joseph Guy LaPointe, Jr. First time I saw him was in the summer of '67. He was singing and playing on a stage at a coffee shop in the cellar of a church in downtown Dayton. He was a musician and a poet. I didn't meet him at that time, but I saw him. He and a friend of mine were singing. We were all interested in music at that time in '67. Later on, during the fall, early fall, we all went to Yellow Springs, a group of friends. My girlfriend Vicky was with Guy. I was with another fella, and we went to this bar where we weren't supposed to be. And that's how Guy and I really got together. He asked me to dance, and he asked to see me the next day, and I agreed. So he came over the next day, which was probably a Saturday, and we went to Hoffman Dam, and he talked about the birds and the plants, and the outdoors was my thing as well, so we really clicked. And he went home. His stepmother tells me he went home that day after seeing me and said, "This is the girl I want to marry." So we went on and dated, and most of our dates consisted of bird watching, and it was great. We became very close through the winter and the spring. He had applied to several colleges. He had already graduated high school, and he had applied to several colleges. He got his draft notice about a week before he got his acceptance to some of the colleges. So there were many running off to Canada, but he would not do that. He wouldn't dishonor his father, who served in World War II. He left on May 8th of '68 and went to basic training. We kept in touch through letters. He came back at the end of August, and we got married. And he was able to come home after advanced training, and we spent October together. We spent a month together, before he was deployed to Vietnam. So at the end of October he left, and then I was living with my dad, and then moved in with my mother and my stepfather at that time. He went straight to Vietnam in November. I've heard from fellas that trained with him and served with him, and so I got some of the feel of what he was experiencing a little bit. Just wanted to be with him. So January 20th, our son was born. He got to see a picture of him. June 2nd, 1969, he was killed on Heath Hill 376 in Vietnam. And we didn't have a lot of information. They came and at first said he was missing in action. I think that was standard procedure at the time, until they go through the autopsy and the identification. And it was just under a week later that they came and told us he had been killed. His poor father collapsed. I went into a state. Then my grandmother came down from Alliance. She had been through a similar experience when she was young. Her first husband died, and she had a small child. So I could see that she was suffering along with me. the doctor put me on Valium or something, whatever the thing was at the time, for about a week. But otherwise, we didn't have support or any outreach from the government or organizations, nothing like they do now. There's a lot more support now, which is a lot better. But so I lived there till that fall, and then I took little Joe and we moved into an apartment. Not a day goes by after all these years that I don't think about Guy every day. I still dream about him. I am remarried. But you know, you have more than one kid. You love each child. I loved Guy. I love my husband now. And I don't know if a lot of people understand that. You don't get over it. It doesn't just go away. Things that have helped me have been my contact with the B Troop, 2nd of the 17th. Back in '97, Fernando de Paris contacted us and invited us to the B Troop reunion. It was only going to be their second one. They had it at Fort Campbell, Kentucky, which is the headquarters for the 101st Airborne Division, of which B Troop is part. And so as a family, we went there and we met Fernando and we met JR and we met Bob Bowler and, you know, the guys that knew him. And we heard stories, and it was amazing. And just when we were leaving, Fernando said to us, "Have you ever considered going back to Vietnam?" Instantly, my son said, "Yes." And I said, "That's where I always wanted to do that." When someone loses a loved one in a wreck on the highway, you see them put up a cross where the person died. We wanted to go and be where he died. So Fernando made the plans, and in '99, at the end of May, we traveled with Fernando and maybe 18 other folks. My sister went with us, and veterans and their wives. Boy, it was a long flight, but when we were coming over Saigon, which is Ho Chi Minh City, I just broke down, thinking about all those kids that came over. And I've heard their stories too, getting off the plane to gunfire. They were told to, you know, when you disembark, you run, because they're snipers. I just couldn't, you know, I just thought about those young men that landed there at that airport. So I was very focused on the mission to get up the hill, which we did some other things, but that's about all I can remember is the hill. And so we did that. It took about a 3-hour hike for all of us, and there was, I think, 18 that started out, and a couple had to drop out. We did have a film crew with us, but I don't think anything was different because of the film crew, except maybe Vietnam is still a communist country, and there are certain things they will not allow you to film, or certain places they will not allow you to go. The government official that was with us, Miss Moon, was very nice. So we got up the hill, and JR told the story because he had been there. He was 17 years old at the time. JR Baltazar. And it was very emotional, hearing the true story about what happened. I didn't walk around the hill a whole lot, but sat on the rock that they were hiding behind, JR and them. A few months before that, Fernando had gone to Washington, D.C., to the wall, and took the rubbings of the names of the 5 soldiers that died that day, which included Guy. So we sat up on this huge boulder, and Joe read the names, and I burned them for him, and it was ceremonial to allow their spirits to be released. I think we all felt something as far as that went. We felt a pull to get up the hill. So when that was over and we had looked around the hill and that sort of thing, as we were leaving, everybody seemed to leave, and my sister and my son and I were there, and we turned around and looked. And Candy says, "Let's sing taps." And then it started raining. I mean, just pouring. And we didn't want to leave. But we did. We came home. And the next year, Joe and I went back with Fernando and many other veterans. And we got to go up the hill again. It's just, I had to go back a second time at least because I was so focused on getting up the hill that I wasn't really seeing much of anything else. And so the second time, I would looked around a little more and could see the people and talk to them a little more, and that was of great value. And the second time we got up the hill, I was able to walk around and see more. I had after Guy had died, I had remarried, and I had another son, and was then divorced after 5 years. And we had people in and out of our lives, but basically it was the 3 of us. I joined Gold Star Wives, but not until about 5 years ago, because I really didn't know much about them. I guess I had heard of them, but that was about it. The young women aren't joining Gold Star Wives now so much. I don't know if they don't see a use or if they got so much support amongst themselves that they don't feel a need. But for myself, I feel like I always waited for Guy to come home. Even through my first marriage, I found myself looking at faces, looking for him. When they brought him back, we did open the casket, and he was there. It was him. It was, no doubt. But there's something in the back of your head that doesn't accept it. So I know a lot of widows that went on to college and got careers and that sort of thing. I just never did that. I got a job. I worked at EDS for 20 years. But I never felt like I had direction. He was going to do it. He was going to direct my life, and it didn't happen. So mostly, now I'm retired now from EDS, and I care for my mother, and I volunteer a lot at the Dayton VA with the American Veterans Heritage Center, and I'm around a lot of veterans all the time, and it just brings me closer to Guy to talk to them, I've been close with some other medics, and the guy was a conscientious objector, and I've known a medic. I knew a medic that was also a conscientious objector, and so to get a feel of what Guy might have been like coming home was good with Joe Doc, who is gone now too. As Fernando is, seeing these guys fall out, pass, is hard. So today I work with, like I said, the AVHC, and we plan events there at the VA for the veterans, because they are stuck there. Many of them are stuck there at the VA. I think people feel like it's a closed community, and it's not. Anybody can drive onto campus, and you can ask to visit or, plan something to do, that sort of thing. So over Memorial Day weekend, we have what we call a festival, a Patriot Freedom Festival, and that takes up a lot of our time all through the year just to plan it. So those are the things that, that sort of thing is important to me, to stay in touch. And my goal is to keep Guy's name alive. Let people know he existed, who he was. He posthumously received the Medal of Honor, the Silver Star, the Bronze Star, and other medals and awards. We've been to ceremonies where there's a hospital at Fort Campbell that was named for him. The U.S. Army Reserve Center in Dayton was named for him. There's roads and buildings all over the country named in his honor. I feel like the folks that do these things and plan these things, it's good for them to see us and know we haven't forgotten. We just, the widows just don't go on about their lives and forget their husbands. They always remember. I raised my sons, and here we are today.
I'm Joseph Guy LaPointe III. My dad was Joseph Guy LaPointe Jr. And my story. I know that my father was killed in Vietnam, and I was about 5 months old at the time. I was born January 20th, and he was killed on June 2nd, 1969. I can't say that I remember a lot about early childhood years. I would guess maybe my age of consciousness, so to speak, began around 9, 10 years old, somewhere in that area. I knew my mom had remarried and had divorced him, and I had a little brother, and we had moved to a house in Kettering. I guess this was around first grade, I remember this. And even in first grade, I still don't even remember hearing about my father. There was a lot of things I didn't understand. I didn't understand why my brother had one set of grandparents and I had another set of grandparents, and we didn't go to each other's grandparents. I didn't necessarily find it weird because that's what I was used to. I didn't understand it either. I believe maybe the first time that I started to understand was there was a Vietnam Veterans Memorial Park that was dedicated on the river corridor in downtown Dayton. I'm not quite certain of the year, but I think that's when I really started to understand that me and my brother didn't have the same fathers, and started to get an idea of what my father had done and what he was all about. I don't know that I really asked any questions. I wasn't a questioning child from what I remember. It was more or less I would listen to my grandparents, my parents, and whoever else wanted to talk, and they would talk. And unfortunately, for the most part, I don't think people talked a lot. And looking back on it, being older and looking back on it, I think it was just because they were hurt so much that it really pained them to talk about it. It pained them to talk about my father. And I think in some instances it probably even pained them to talk to me just because I was my father's son. As time went on, you know, I started learning a lot more basic facts about my dad. That he had served, that he had been awarded these medals. You know, at that age they were just medals. They didn't mean anything to me. But I made a decision, I don't know when, that I wanted to join the Army. I wanted to go, I wanted to have the experience, I wanted to see what it was like, see what it was all about. So my mom had to sign for me to go in at 17, which I think she did so quite reluctantly. You know, she didn't like us playing Army, and I don't even think she'd let us have squirt guns when we were growing up. She was so dead set against guns and violence and everything else. So, you know, having her have to sign the papers when I was 17 for me to go in early, I think that was tough for her. I'm glad she did it. I'm glad she found the strength to do it. I don't think then I appreciated it for what it was. I think it took a long time for me to appreciate the fact that she did that. So I had my military experience. And I mean, there's a camaraderie and a brotherhood that I don't think unless you've been in the military, you're not going to understand that. You're not going to understand how you feel about, you know, your comrades, your brothers in arms. And if I hadn't have been in the military, I never would have understood that. So I got out, and I was still in my early 20s. And I still really lacked direction. I think I lacked direction for a long time, and I think a lot of it came from I was just immature, and I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that I was raised without a father. I had a few male superiors, but none that were really a father figure. I remembered, you know, a couple teachers. There was Mr. Whitmore. I remember he was an amazing teacher, and you know, he helped me. He opened my eyes to a lot of things. And I'm sorry, I'm kind of going backwards in time here. This is I don't know, 14, 15 years old area. He opened my eyes to seeing the world and not being so focused on my little block of it, my little piece of ground. So going back into my 20s here, I have no direction, and I had no direction for a long time. In 1997, someone had approached my mom. His name was Fernando de Paris. And he talked to her about going to a B Troop reunion, which is the unit that my dad was attached to. And she talked to me about it, and I was very into it. I'll never pass up the opportunity to learn something about my father because I have no first-hand experiences with him. So we went to that. I think the next year there was the Quad A Awards where we met General Burke, which was his commanding lieutenant in Vietnam. And the year after that was when we went to Vietnam for the first time. That was 1999. In 1999, I was 30 years old. And we went to Vietnam late May, early June. And all I can really think about there is our main mission was to go and see the place where this battle had been on Hill 376 and, try to get some kind of grasp on what my dad had gone through as a 20-year-old, a 19-year-old, and it was really our only mindset at that time. That's all I can remember thinking about. I know that we visited the country, and I think we were there for almost 2 weeks, but that one day meant more to me than any other time there. It was June 2nd. It was the exact day of the battle that we'd gone up the hill, 30 years to the day. And talking with some of the vets that went with us that were there that day, said the conditions were exactly the same. It was very hot, very humid. It's 90 degrees, 90% humidity. A long, long walk. It was frankly pretty miserable. Sweat pouring out every pore of your body, sun burning your skin everywhere it was exposed. And it was about 3.5 hours, and we came to the bottom of Hill 376. At the bottom of Hill 376, there was a little hut, and this family lived inside, and we stopped there to take a rest before we proceeded to go up the hill. Fernando, who had organized the whole thing, he couldn't make it any farther. That was as far as he could go. And that hurt a lot. He was glad that he had made it that far, but I was really sad to see that that's as far as he could go. Fernando was a helicopter pilot in June '69, and he was one of the pilots that dropped the guys off on top of Hill 376. It was 3 choppers that went up there, 6 guys unloaded from each chopper. So there was 18 guys on the hill that day. We went up the hill, and as we're going up the hill, JR kind of took the lead. JR Baltazar, he kind of took the lead. When we got up there, he started describing where they landed and the paths that they took around the hill. You think of a hill, the 376 is a big hill. It's named because it's 370 meters tall. So you can think it's 1,000 feet high, something like that. It is rather tall, but he was describing, how the platoon was arranged. And when you read his Medal of Honor citation, you get a little bit of a glimpse at what happened there, but listening to JR being on top of the hill and describing what happened and being able to see the terrain and know what was going on and know how these guys felt up there, that gave me a more of a sense of being close to what happened than anything that I've ever been through. When JR was telling the story, I broke down. It hurt to hear it. I mean, it was a big relief on me to know these things, but just to think about, relating my military experience and how I felt about the guys that I was with, relating that to how these guys were in 1969, and, being the same age as I was when I went in, 17, 18 years old. JR was actually 17 at the time. He was the youngster of the group. And it affected him a lot, but hearing his story, I broke down. There wasn't a dry eye on that hill, and everybody was there for a reason. Everybody there was either there, had a loved one there. There was wives and other family members that had gone with us. We had brought some rubbings that Fernando brought from the wall, and they were rubbings from the wall of the guys that were killed that day on that hill, because it was not just my dad. And we had a little ceremony. There was a rock, as we called it, but it was a very large boulder. It's about a 20-foot diameter boulder that you could climb on top of. It was flat on top. And I read off the names, and then we set the rubbings on fire. Ashes to ashes. It was a big release for me, because I think there was a lot of pent-up emotion in me that I didn't even realize was there. I considered that day to be the day that I grew up. Before then, I had no direction. I was fumbling my way through life. There were so many questions that were unanswered. And that day answered a lot of questions for me. That trip answered a lot of questions for me. Being with the guys that were with my dad, hearing the stories about him, the way he used to act, the things he used to do. He was silly. He was a likable guy. He was a joker. He wanted to have a good time. And he made the best out of a bad situation. I mean, no matter how you slice it, the Vietnam War was a hellhole. And those guys really did everything they could not to let that bring them down. I'm amazed by that, and some of the stories, I won't go into them, but some of the stories are just silly, crazy, and things you wouldn't expect. So that's kind of the day I grew up, June 2nd, 1999. That's all I remember about our first trip there. We had finished up on the hill. We were getting ready to head down, and it was about 12:30 in the afternoon. I remember it like it was yesterday. It's very weird. It was about 12:30 in the afternoon, and as we started heading back down, the monsoons, it's monsoon season, so the monsoon rains came in, and it was a cool, refreshing rain, such a break from the heat. And I was sticking pretty close to JR then, and he said, 30 years ago, it's the exact same weather. Said it was hot and miserable when we landed here. Said, and I remember about 12:30 in the afternoon, here come the rain, and it was cool and refreshing. By then, the firefight itself, to hear the actual story of the firefight from JR, because it wasn't just a quick in and out thing. It didn't just happen and then it was over. It wasn't like that at all. They dropped them on the hill. They'd gone down one side, ran into some resistance, enough to switch them around, send them back the other way. They'd gone back the other way, and they ran into a lot more resistance. A couple guys got hit. My dad had gone to apply some medical aid to them, and ultimately he was hit and killed. But they were stuck there. They couldn't even get to him. The other guys that were there couldn't get to him. There was so much enemy fire coming. They couldn't get to him. They couldn't get to Manuel Saunders, Dennis Prince. Those were a couple of the other guys that were hit. And they were pinned down through the whole day, in through the night. Fernando was one of the helicopter pilots. He told me about constantly making ammo runs in there, because from the top of Hill 376 you could see the base where they were stationed, and I guess it turns out it was like actually the North Vietnamese 3rd Division had dug into this hill, and this wasn't known until much later on, but they literally had thousands of troops up there, so it was thousands against 18 guys. And there was another helicopter pilot, Ken, and he was making ammo runs. They were trying to drop food in, and it got to the point where it was too dark and they couldn't do anything. And basically, they made the one last run, and they just prayed that that they could hold them off through the night. They did hold them off through the night. They got out the next morning. They got extracted. The bodies of the fallen were not extracted at that time. I guess they had sent another crew in later, was my understanding. So, if you think about this from the perspective of these men being 17, 18, 19, 20 years old, it's horrifying to think about what they'd gone through. And knowing them nowadays, the guys that went on that trip with us, this was a healing experience for them as well. It was a learning experience for me to learn about, who my father was, what kind of person he was. But it was a very healing situation for them. And every one of them changed. Every one of them will tell you that they changed. That day changed their life. It changed their life. It changed my life. It changed my mother's life. And all for the better. It was like just such a great burden had been lifted from everyone's shoulders. And, when we had burnt the rubbings up there was a very real release of pain. And I don't think there was anyone there that couldn't feel it or didn't feel it. So that was a very, very memorable day in my life. We left there, and I honestly, it's another 3.5 hour trek down the mountain. It seemed like it took half a day to get up it, but when we headed back down, we were back down in no time. I mean, it felt like we were just transported back to the edge of the trail instantly. I have very little recollection of walking back, because it was just, there was a moment of clarity, just everything had become clear, and there was nothing left to think about at that time. We were still in Vietnam. I think that was pretty early in our trip. That was about 4th or 5th day. So we still had another good week and a half in Vietnam. And we traveled around and we did things. And, but I wasn't there, not mentally. I was still coming down from the hill. And, I mean, it took me a couple years really to remember what we had done even. We took pictures and, kind of did the touristy thing, but we weren't tourists. And we came home and, I don't know, had a new appreciation for life. Me and my mom talked about it later on, I think, and we both agreed that we felt the same way, about the trip itself. It was very, very therapeutic. But we both think we missed a lot, just because we were dedicated to this mission of going to the hill. And so we went back in 2000. And we had a new mission in 2000, and our mission was to be a tourist, take in the culture, the people, understand, get an idea of what Vietnam is really about. And we went up the hill again. I could go up that hill 1,000 times and it'll never be like that first time. The first time was the journey that mattered. The second time I went up it brought back the memories from the first time, but not at the intensity level, because we weren't there for that mission. We knew we had made our peace with Hill 376,